Greetings, friends. Today we continue our journey on Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And today we're going to meditate on verses 12 to verse 14. And verse 12 says the following: I know that there is nothing better for them than to rejoice and enjoy the good life. The word good appears again, and in Hebrew it is again tov. And last time we discussed about tov. Tov appears in Genesis chapter 1 for the first time. It appears for 7 times. After God created, in each day he ended that day by saying it is good. It says God saw what he had done, and behold, it was good. And then when you get to verse 31, the Bible says, behold, it was very good at the end when he saw everything. And so the good life is only a good life when God is the center of that life, when God is the one who creates that life. And so when Solomon says, I know that there is nothing better for them than to rejoice and enjoy the good life is a life according to God. It is a life that is subjected to God, a life that is conformed to God, because that's the life. It is a Christ-centered life, a theocentric life, where God is the center, God is the focus. And that was the beauty of the Garden of Eden. Everything was God-centered. And some other time I would love to get into the details of that. Studying Genesis 1, 2, and 3 and seeing that theocentric perspective of the Garden of Eden. And the fall was because of pride, when man became self-centered. But what God had provided there was the good life. It was life how God intended it to be. And unfortunately, Adam and Eve went contrary to that. So anytime we go contrary to God's will, we are headed towards the bad life. A life without rejoicing, a life without enjoying. That is, true enjoying and true rejoicing is only in the context of God. All right, let's go to verse 13. Verse 13 says, it is also the gift of God whenever anyone eats, drinks, and enjoys all his efforts. So not only is the good life the gift of God, which is presented in verse 12, but 13 says eating, drinking, and enjoying all our efforts, all the work we do, is also a blessing from God. Now, this concept was already repeated or was already mentioned in chapter 2. It was already emphasized there that true enjoyment comes from the hand of God. But it also says that so that we can enjoy all our efforts. Now let me go to verse 14. I'm going to connect with this last phrase in verse 13, which says enjoy all our efforts. So let's go to verse 14. Verse 14 says, I know that all God does will last forever. There is no adding to it or taking from it. God works so that people will be in awe of him. This is a packed verse, and once again it takes us back to Genesis. He says, I know that all God does will last forever. The word does here in Hebrew is asach, and it's the verb that appears a lot in Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2. The Bible says God saw what he had done. The word there, done, is asach, and then God said, behold, it is good. Tov. And those two words appear in the context that we are looking at. And then when you get to Genesis 1 and 2, and it says God blessed on the seventh day, and he ended the work he had done. The word there, done, asach, appears here. And Ecclesiastes 3:14 says, I know that all God does will last forever. Isn't that wonderful? And then it says there is no adding to it or taking from it. God's works so that people will be in awe of him. And what God had done in Genesis, no one can add to it. No one can take from it. And he did it in a way that we would be awed, that we would be amazed with his work. And so this, for me, takes me a lot back to Genesis. Remember that in chapter 2, Solomon was angry with the work he had done under the sun. And the reason why he was angry was because he was laboring for himself. And he said, all this work I'm doing with all this wisdom, and then someone is going to come after me and enjoy my work and enjoy my labor. And he said, this is vanity. But what we see here is that the way that God worked in Genesis, God worked for us. And somewhere along here, let me see, verse 13, it is also the gift of God. Yes, so God here labors to give the result of his work as a gift for us. Solomon in chapter 2 was laboring for himself. It's a contrast over there. And what we are being presented here is that in order for us to find joy in our work, we shouldn't simply just work for ourselves. Primarily, we should work for God, honor God, and then we should also work to serve others. So God and men. And when we work theocentrically, not self-centered, then we find enjoyment in what we do. We find tov, good, pleasure, that goodness we will experience. Friends, may God bless you. And as you go about your day and in all that you do, remember not to do things selfishly. Remember to do things in light of God, for the glory of God, for God, and for our fellow men. And in doing so, we shall find great joy in the labor and in any task that we seek to accomplish. Today, a lot of people compete and so many other things that we do for the wrong reasons. May the Lord bless you and see you soon.